Hello and welcome to Press TV's Debate. I'm Marcia Hashmi. Thanks so much for being with us. 2 weeks have passed since the beginning of the latest clampdown and clashes in Indian-controlled Kashmir. A popular Kashmiri pro-independence leader, Burhan Wani, who had a large following on social media, was killed in clashes with the Indian military on July the 8th. Since then, chaos has broken out with demonstrations being held and curfews implemented. Now, at least 45 people have been killed with thousands injured. A beautiful region of the world, which some say looks like a piece of heaven, has become a living hell for many. Stay with us as we take a look at Indian-controlled Kashmir. We're going to cross over. We're going to start off getting the latest on the ground there in Kashmir with Press TV's Shahana Butt. Shahana, thanks so much for being with us. Please fill us in on the latest situation on the ground that has taken place.
Again, a very unfortunate talking to you about Kashmir. I don't think there has ever been a time when I have passed on some good news to the viewers about Kashmir. Kashmir is simmering for the past 2 weeks, and there hasn't been much outcry. The latest is that civilian death toll continues to increase. Injured continue to come to hospitals. Curfew and restriction and clampdown from the government forces continue. And people are high in anger, and they are demanding a solution which is lasting solution. This time, they are not ready to budge like they budged in 2008 in Fada and in 2010. So this time, things are like completely different. It is totally a people's moment, people demanding that, no, now we need a permanent solution. Every time bloodshed will cause a lot of problem for the region, because the region has remained indifferent, underdeveloped, and a lot of problems for the people because of the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan. Right now, people are looking for international help. International help from countries like Pakistan, the immediate neighbor and the country that claims half of Kashmir at the moment. They are demanding that at least international community should come forward. Islamic world should come forward for the rescue. Like the other issues of the world have been resolved, why Kashmir has not been resolved till now? When we talk of Kashmir, Kashmir is not an Islamist, what the West and India tries to figure it like. It is an Islamist moment, a terrorist moment, which is not true. It is completely a political movement, and people are demanding for a political solution.
All right. Thank you so much for bringing us that update out of Kashmir. That's Press TV's Shahana Butt. I'd like to welcome my guest now to the program from the Kashmir Institute of International Affairs, Mr. Muzammil Ayub Thakur out of Islamabad, and also the director of the Center for Muslim Affairs. So we're going to start this off in Islamabad with Mr. Thakur. Why do we continue to see these clashes in Indian-controlled Kashmir on an almost regular basis?
It's a regular basis, if it was considered to be a regular basis, is the first thing. I don't think people realize how often these clashes happen. It's on a daily basis now. And the reason why it's ongoing is, as you mentioned previously, it's because of Burhan Wani. But that was just the tipping point. You have to realize before that, there were killings before that for the last several weeks anyway. And upon his death, there were obviously thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that came out for his funeral, not just supporting what he stood for, not just supporting his ideology, but more importantly, supporting people's own sentiment, the sentiment for justice, for peace, for security, for freedom.
Mr. Thakur, some Kashmiris say that any crime, from rape to murder, which allegedly takes place by Indian troops, will be basically ignored by the global community. I want your perspective on that statement.
Look, it's fact. We've seen it since the late 80s and the early 90s that the armed forces in Kashmir, and we have to remember these are not security forces, these are armed forces, they have impunity from being prosecuted. You have the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which grants the army, which grants these military personnel complete freedom to do whatever they will, kill at will, without having to see a day in court. They are rapes. Kunan Pashpura is one of the most famous rape cases in Kashmir, where an entire village with the age ranges between 8 and 80, that's 8 years old and 80 years old, were raped. So these things have been going on for the last 20, 30 years. There is complete unrestricted human rights violations inside Jammu and Kashmir at the moment. Look, I've just been there. I go there regularly. I live there. I travel there. I've seen these cases. I've just been in Kashmir with the hospitals, with the tortured, with the victims, people that are suffering at the moment. And we're not talking about just historically. We're talking about the current scenario. You know, a lot of arguments are coming in from the Indian institutions that, oh, we're talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago. Granted, okay, fine. For a moment, let's say that was true. What about these cases? For example, just yesterday, a young boy, less than 10 years old, I think he may have been 5 or 6 years old, sand was poured into his eyes and a needle was stuck into his eyes by military personnel. That is torture. That is happening today in 2016, July.
So where's the international community
Rape
with
is
what
there,
you're saying?
murder is there,
with
torture
what you're
is there.
saying, sir, that you have just witnessed, then where's the outrage? Where's the role of the international community in all of this? Why is it silent?
No, it's a very valid question, and I think in reflection, the only answer is business ties. I mean, look, India is one of the largest economies in the world. They have a 1.2 billion population on Earth. Most things outsourced to India: manufacturing, telecommunications, you know, manual labor. A lot of these things come from India. Who on earth would want to disrupt an economic power such as India just for a few thousand people that are being tortured, killed and raped every single day? It's obviously not financial sense. You have to remember, in 1996, Robin Cook went to India. He was the foreign minister for the Labour Party at the time, and he was thrown out of India because he mentioned the Kashmir issue. 20 years later, his colleague in 2006, David Miliband, went to India, didn't speak a word about Kashmir and did $1 billion deal for a battleship. These are the realities of the world. The international media, the international governments, nobody is focusing on Kashmir. Not because it's not a serious issue. Syria is a serious issue. Palestine is a serious issue. What, is our issue not a serious issue? Do we not bleed? Do we not get killed? The issue is about the global politics, the global socio-economics. It's greater than just what we see in terms of death and destruction. And I think it's time that people start pulling their head out the sand and realizing that, you know, one man's death should not be entertained more than somebody else's, and everybody should be equal in this.
We're going to cross over and see what some of our viewers have had to say about this subject on Facebook.
Jammu and Kashmir people are peaceful people and are demanding the implementation of the UN resolutions that have been promised to them. Once the UN fulfills its promise, Kashmir issue will be solved. Really thankful to Press TV for exposing the Indian brutality in Kashmir. Press TV, thanks for showing the real picture of our Kashmir. If you think India will lose land to your religious ideas, you're mistaken. India is not weak, and they have more than enough people there. Don't bother making them mad. This is not a peaceful protest. This is riot. When you start throwing firebombs and rocks, petrol bombs at the soldiers, you're inviting the wrath of a man who is just trained to use gun. It has been now 70 years we're fighting for our freedom. Thousands of innocent people have been killed by Indian army. Thousands of unmarked graves, rapes, torture, and thousands are listed as disappeared persons. But still the whole world is silent. It's only because Kashmiris are Muslims. All Muslim countries should suspend their relations with India and designate it as a terrorist country like Israel.
Well, let's cross over to Mr. Thakur. Your perspective, you've heard some of the comments from our Facebook page. Let's look at the Muslim side of things, Muslim countries. It talked about Muslim countries perhaps putting it more pressure on India. How likely is that to happen in your perspective?
when it comes to the Muslim countries, the most predominant organization out there is the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And we're hoping that they will put some pressure in the coming days, and they have previously historically done so. But you have to remember the same thing. It comes back to the same problem, that they have these political, economic ties with India existing. A lot of Indian nationals are working in the Middle East, which is predominantly Muslim, as laborers. Can you imagine if the Indian government demanded that all their laborers exit from these Arab countries, from these Muslim countries? The entire labor force would collapse. That is an issue, but at the same time, we have to remember this is a human rights situation. I know the brother previously mentioned about since 1947 we've been demanding freedom and a plebiscite, and I think on the record, it's time that we start talking about the smaller pieces that we can achieve. I think freedom is something that is always going to be on people's minds, which is something which is hopefully in the long term, but in the short term, we need to start finding justice. We need to start finding peace. We need to start finding ways to stop the massacre that's happening in Kashmir. I'm just getting a report that 77 Times of India have confirmed 77 deaths in Kashmir in just a matter of 2 weeks. So I think that freedom is there, the sentiment of freedom is there, and it will not go away. But I think incrementally what we need to start doing is to make India responsible for their actions. We need to start putting them on trial. We need to start putting pressure on them, and we need to start bringing peace to the region. And then slowly, incrementally, piece by piece, bit by bit, we can start asking for a referendum the same way that we had one for the Brexit, so to speak, as well as what the Scottish people ask for as well. And I think it's time that if in this day and age that the Sudanese can create South Sudan, North Sudan, East Timor can become separate from Indonesia, the Scottish can have the right of a referendum, why can't Kashmir? Why not?
When the UN says Kashmir is a disputed region, do you think that the UN should be more aggressive, more involved in trying to bring peace there? Will it make a difference, or which entity do you think needs to help get involved to try to solve this situation?
You know, it's funny you should mention the United Nations. Just a couple of weeks ago, a few of my colleagues and myself, we went to the United Nations office and we protested out there, banging on their doors, asking them to come out. It turns out that they weren't even in the building. There is a United Nations military observer group in Kashmir, and they weren't even in Kashmir. So, you know, there is an expectation from the United Nations because of the resolutions, because it has been signed. It is a legal document between India, Pakistan and the United Nations and obviously the rest of the world. It should be implementable. I mean, most of these other resolutions are implemented, or they're at least observed or criticized for those that break those resolutions. In the case of India, nothing seems to be done. There is hope for the United Nations, but at the same time we remember that the United Nations most of the time seem to have the resolutions and policies vetoed by the superpowers, mainly the United States. And if it's not in their interest, then nothing is going to go through. But again, it comes back to the same thing, that which institution, if not the United Nations, then who else? We have hope with the OIC. If not the OIC, individuals, NGOs, institutes, academics, politicians, you know, doctors, anybody, any institute, be it big or small, can contribute, can put some pressure. Even as an individual, you can put some pressure on your local MP, on your senator, on anybody, you know, that has a certain amount of power, that can start talking about Kashmir. And I think that's where it needs to begin. I think since 47, a lot of people have forgotten about Kashmir. Since 89, most people don't even remember Kashmir. And I think we need to start from scratch. It is an issue. It is still pending. If the Palestinian issue has been going on since 1947-48, so is the Kashmir issue. But nobody seems to remember it, apart from obviously our friends at Press TV, but no other media channel, no other institute.
All right, and on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd like to thank both my guests and, of course, our correspondent, Shahina Butt, who was with us in the beginning, and also from the Kashmir Institute of International Affairs, Mr. Mozammil Ayub Thakur out of Islamabad. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us on another debate. I'm Marzieh Hashmi signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Thanks so much, and goodbye.